You see a mountain in winter, and you probably just see snow. A string of lights strung along a gondola line. A lodge with smoke curling out of its chimney. People in bright jackets carving lines down a slope that someone, at some point, had to decide to build. But the real economics behind a ski resort are far more interesting than you think. Because underneath the snow is one of the strangest businesses in the world. Part landlord, part amusement park, part weatherbed. Who actually owns the mountain you're standing on? Start with the land itself. Here's the twist almost nobody knows. Most ski resorts in the United States don't actually own their mountain. They lease it. Around 60% of ski terrain in the U.S. sits on land managed by the U.S. Forest Service, and resorts operate under a special use permit rather than outright ownership. That means your resort empire could be built entirely on land you don't hold the deed to. You pay the federal government a fee tied to your revenue, and in exchange you get the right to run lifts, cut trails, and build lodges on public forest. It's less like buying a business and more like leasing a very, very large storefront. Strange, right? A multi-million-dollar operation, standing on land it doesn't own. And the permit itself isn't permanent. Special use permits typically run for decades, but they come up for renewal, and renewal isn't automatic. The Forest Service can attach new conditions, environmental requirements, or fee structures each time a permit comes due, which means even a resort that's operated successfully for 50 years is never fully free of federal oversight. Some owners describe it less like running a business and more like being a very well-paying tenant to the United States government. Others actually prefer it because it keeps competitors from simply buying up every mountain in a region. The permit system, in a strange way, protects the resorts that already have one. It's a quiet form of moat, built not from brand loyalty or capital, but from bureaucracy itself. Now let's talk about the types of ownership, because there isn't just one way in. The first path is buying an existing resort outright, land, lifts, lodges, brand, and all. This is the fastest route and the most expensive, with small independent resorts trading for a few $1,000,000 and larger destination resorts running into the hundreds of millions. The second path is corporate consolidation, which is where most of the real money in skiing actually lives. Companies like Vail Resorts and Alterra Mountain Company have spent the last 2 decades buying up individual mountains and folding them into a single pass product, the Epic Pass and the Icon Pass, so that one subscription unlocks dozens of resorts. This model turns skiing from a one-mountain business into a portfolio business, spreading weather risk across an entire continent of terrain. The third path is building from raw land, which is the slowest, riskiest, and by far the most capital-intensive option, often requiring tens of millions of dollars before a single lift ticket is ever sold. And the fourth path, quieter but increasingly common, is owning the real estate around a resort rather than the resort itself, developing condos, chalets, and hotels on land adjacent to someone else's mountain and letting their lift tickets drive your property values. Which of these sounds like the real business to you? Because for a lot of owners, it isn't the skiing at all. There's also a meaningful split between the mega resort model and the boutique model, and it changes almost everything about how the business behaves. Aspen Skiing Company, which operates 4 mountains under one brand, has deliberately stayed out of the giant multi-resort pass wars for years, betting instead that a smaller, more curated collection of terrain can command premium pricing and fierce loyalty. Compare that to Vail Resorts, which now operates dozens of mountains across multiple countries under a single pass, prioritizing volume and geographic diversification over any single mountain's individual identity. Neither approach is wrong. One is a luxury brand strategy. The other is a subscription scale strategy. But an owner has to pick a lane early, because trying to be both usually means succeeding at neither. Pick the luxury lane without the brand history to back it up, and you're just an expensive mountain nobody's heard of. Pick the volume lane without the balance sheet to survive the acquisitions, and you're outspent within a few seasons by companies that already have 40 mountains behind them. Let's get into the real economics, because this is where the fantasy meets the spreadsheet. Building a mid-sized resort from scratch, including lifts, snowmaking systems, grooming equipment, and base lodges, typically starts around $5 to $20 million just for the foundational infrastructure, and that number climbs fast for anything larger or more luxurious. Land in a prime mountain corridor, places like Colorado or Utah, can run over $1 million an acre before you've built a single trail. Then come the permits and environmental studies, which can add anywhere from tens of thousands to several $100,000 depending on how sensitive the terrain is. Once you're open, the operating costs never really stop. Snowmaking alone, pumping water and compressed air through miles of pipe to manufacture snow when nature doesn't cooperate, can cost a resort anywhere from $100,000 to well over $1 million in a single season. Electricity to run lifts, lodges, and snow guns can run $500,000 to $3 million a year. Insurance, covering everything from lift accidents to avalanche liability, often lands in a similar range, sometimes higher. And here's the part that catches new owners off guard. A ski resort is a seasonal business trying to pay year-round bills. Payroll, debt service, and maintenance don't pause in July just because the lifts do. Most resort builds are financed with a heavy mix of debt, and lenders know exactly how seasonal this business is, which is why interest rates on ski resort development loans tend to run higher than comparable commercial real estate. That debt load is one reason the season pass model became so important industry-wide. Selling a pass in the spring, months before a single snowflake falls, locks in cash when a resort needs it most and shifts weather risk away from the operator and onto the skier, who's already paid regardless of how the season turns out. It's a subtle but brilliant piece of financial engineering. The mountain hasn't opened yet, and the revenue is already banked. So where does the actual money come from? Lift tickets are the most visible revenue stream, but they're often not the most profitable one, especially once resorts started selling season passes at a discount to guarantee cash flow before the snow even falls. The real margins tend to hide elsewhere. Food and beverage inside a resort operates like a captive market. A burger at 9,000 feet with no competition down the block can carry restaurant-grade markups without restaurant-grade competition. Ski and snowboard rentals, lessons, and ski school programs add another layer, often priced as premium add-ons rather than commodity services. Retail, selling goggles, gloves, and gear right at the base, captures impulse spending from people who forgot a layer at home. And then there's real estate, which for many resort owners is quietly the biggest prize of all. A ski resort doesn't just sell a day on the mountain. It sells the fantasy of owning a piece of that mountain forever, and condos, cabins, and slopeside homes built around a resort can appreciate dramatically once the lifts are running and the brand is established. Some owners will tell you, off the record, that the skiing exists to sell the real estate, not the other way around. It's a pattern that shows up again and again in mountain towns, where the ski operation itself runs on thin single-digit margins, while the surrounding land development, homes, hotels, and commercial space carries the profit the whole enterprise is really built around. Sell the dream of ski and ski-out living, and the lift ticket becomes almost an afterthought. Who's actually involved in getting a resort like this running? It starts with the U.S. Forest Service or equivalent state land agencies if the resort sits on public land, granting and renewing the special use permits that let the operation exist at all. Local and county governments get involved through zoning, water rights, and infrastructure approvals, especially for anything involving new roads or utility expansion. Environmental consultants and engineers assess avalanche risk, water usage for snowmaking, and wildlife impact long before construction begins. Then come the operators themselves, either an independent ownership group or, increasingly, a larger conglomerate like Vail Resorts folding the mountain into a multi-resort pass network. Lenders and investors provide the capital, often structured as a mix of debt and equity, given how capital-intensive the build-out is. And underneath all of it are the seasonal workforce logistics, hundreds of lift operators, ski instructors, groomers, and lodge staff who need to be housed, often in a mountain town where affordable housing is already scarce. Now for the challenges, because this business breaks in ways most people never consider. Weather is the obvious one, but it cuts both directions. Too little natural snow and you're burning cash on snowmaking. Too much snow, or the wrong kind, storm closures, avalanche control delays, and you lose operating days you can never get back. Climate patterns have made snowfall increasingly unpredictable at lower elevations, pushing many resorts to invest even more heavily in artificial snowmaking just to guarantee a consistent season. Then there's the seasonality problem baked into the entire business model. A resort might generate the overwhelming majority of its annual revenue in a 4 to 5 month winter window, meaning the rest of the year is spent servicing debt and paying fixed costs with a fraction of the income. Labor is another quiet crisis. Mountain towns are expensive, seasonal workers need housing that often doesn't exist locally, and resorts increasingly compete with each other for a shrinking pool of willing seasonal staff. Liability looms over everything. Lift accidents, avalanche incidents, and injury claims carry real legal and financial exposure, which is why insurance costs sit so high. And consolidation itself has become a challenge for independent owners. When a handful of companies control the major multi-resort pass products, a small independent mountain competing on its own can struggle to draw skiers away from a pass that already includes 40 other mountains. There's also a slower-moving challenge that doesn't show up on any single year's balance sheet, but shapes the entire industry's future. Lower elevation resorts, the ones without the altitude to guarantee cold enough temperatures for reliable natural snow, are increasingly vulnerable as average winter temperatures shift over time. Some of these mountains have already had to pivot towards summer operations, mountain biking, zip lines, alpine coasters, festivals, just to keep revenue flowing across 12 months instead of 4. What started as a side hustle to fill the off-season is quietly becoming, for some resorts, a larger and more stable business than winter ever was. That's worth sitting with. The ski resort of the future might make more money from mountain bikers in July than skiers in January. So what would someone seriously curious about this actually need to know first? Start by understanding that the land question comes before every other question. Whether you'd be leasing federal land through a special use permit, buying private land outright, or developing real estate adjacent to someone else's resort completely changes your entire financial structure before you've thought about a single lift. From there, look closely at snowmaking infrastructure and water rights in whatever region you're considering. Because in a warming climate, the ability to manufacture reliable snow is quickly becoming the difference between a resort that survives and one that doesn't. And if the capital required for a full mountain feels out of reach, know that there are smaller entry points. Buying into resort-adjacent real estate, investing in a smaller regional hill, or even studying how the major pass networks operate before ever attempting to compete with them directly. It's also worth studying how a resort makes money in the months nobody's watching. Anyone can build a business plan around a great ski season. The owners who actually last are the ones who've already answered the harder question. What happens here in August, when the lifts are still, the lodge is quiet, and the debt payment is due exactly the same as it was in January? Here's the counterintuitive truth in all of this. The mountain isn't really the business. The land, the real estate around it, the pass network it plugs into, and the year-round cash flow strategy built to survive a business that only truly runs 4 months a year, that's the actual business. The snow is just the marketing. So the next time you look at a mountain covered in groomed white trails and think it's simply a place people go to ski, remember what's actually underneath it. A federal land lease. A snowmaking budget bigger than most small businesses' entire revenue. A real estate play disguised as a lift ticket. And a bet, placed every single season, on whether the sky will cooperate.